Hello everyone. I hope everybody's doing fine and you guys are all staying safe, washing your hands and healthy and everything. Today we are going to be reading from Miss Ida's Porch. It's kind of a long story, so I want to get started right away as quickly as we can. The first thing you need to know is that you should always be doing your Achieve lessons. The district is requiring that you do at least 3 Achieve lessons a week. I want you guys to try and get on Achieve every single day. And just spend about 20 minutes on Achieve. It should not take you very long, but it is so important to me that you are doing Achieve every day. Other than that, for me, you just need to be checking into Google Classroom and commenting on these videos and doing your writing prompts. I give you a little bit of a writing prompt each day. So remember, Achieve, Google Classroom, and then you do your writing prompt that I give you each day. And I want to go ahead and get started real quick so we can do our story today. You guys will remember that yesterday we worked on my story about making the lemon meringue pie. And I had my thesis, which said last week I baked a delicious lemon meringue pie. And then I had my 3 bullet points, 1, 2, 3, for my beginning, middle, and end. And then yesterday I added the details. So we have my bullet points in the black ink, my details in the blue ink, and then today what I did was I added transitional phrases and a hook in orange. So I want you guys to go into your own essay and I want you to add your own transitional phrases and a hook in a different color or a pen or pencil or whatever. So my hook, now we usually use a question for a hook. That's kind of what we've stuck to this year, but listen to my hook. I used a quote. They say life is what you make of it, but I say life is what you bake of it. So I kind of opened mine with a little bit of humor, which I thought was kind of a fun way to start my essay, and it grabs the reader's attention, and it's a little bit funny, a little bit silly, a great way to get the attention. And then I went into my hook. Last week I baked a delicious lemon meringue pie, and then my first transitional phrase, I said the first step I took was I gathered all the ingredients and got my kitchen ready. So boys and girls, I put that first transitional phrase before my first bullet point. Okay, you're going to do the same thing. Then I have my details. My next transitional phrase is, after I got everything ready, I followed the instructions and mixed it together. So I added another transitional phrase right there, and then my next bullet point, and then for the end I did a very simple, finally, I ate my delicious creation. So today's writing prompt is super quick, super fast, super easy. It will not take you very long, but I do expect you to be doing that so that you can stay on target. Now, I'm going to start our read aloud for today, and it is a little bit longer, so we are going to have to pay attention, and depending on how long it goes, I might finish it tomorrow and have you guys kind of make a guess about what you think will happen. From Miss Ida's Porch, by Sandra Belton, illustrated by Floyd Cooper. Now, before we get started, I want you guys to listen to the title and look at the pictures in this story. And I want you to make a guess. Do you think this will be fiction or nonfiction? Just based on what we're seeing. I see a lot of words. The pictures are not real photographs, but that doesn't mean it's not necessarily true. What do you think the genre of this story is? Fiction, nonfiction? We learned there's realistic fiction, historical fiction. What do you guys think? There's a very best time of the day on Church Street, my street. It begins when the sky and my feelings match, both kind of rosy around the edges. You can hear all the best noises, Shoo Kate and Mr. Fisher laughing from their kitchen, Reginald and T-Bone slamming out their back door, Mr. Porter coming home from work in his noisy old car calling out to everybody he passes on the street, Netta practicing on her piano, mostly to get out of washing dinner dishes, and Mr. Willie making his just check-in on call to Mrs. Jackson, his 90-year-old mama. The noises feel good. Oh, boys and girls, you know what? This story, I'm thinking this story is kind of like a memory. So the author is writing about something from her past. What we call that is a memoir. Okay, so a memoir. Do you guys ever remember when we read When I Was Young and in the Mountains. That's also a memoir, kind of like looking back on something fondly. Most of the big kids are getting ready to hang out somewhere, like at the drugstore down on the corner or the steps of the front of the church. Those are some of their favorite pretending places. The boys pretend not to see the girls, and the girls pretending to ignore the boys. Like my sister Sylvia pretending to ignore Pee-wee. What do you think that means about her sister and Pee-wee? Most of the little kids are getting ready for bed. Getting ready for bed takes a long time for the little kids. Some of them can make it last all the way to the end of the best time, especially the Tolvar kids. Just 5 more minutes, Mama, please, they say. Then after 5 minutes, they hide somewhere in the yard for 5 more minutes. Then they start pleading all over again for 5 more minutes. But most of all, the kids on Church Street are in-between kids, like Freda and me. Some of the best times we just sit on her porch or mine, playing jacks or reading comics. Sometimes we play statues and the Rosetta and Pumpkin and Rodney. With Rosetta, Pumpkin, and Rodney. Sometimes T-Bone plays too. Maybe you guys are making connections and you have neighbors or friends who you kind of play with right before bed too. That might be a great connection you have. Most of the best times, though, are just about all of us end up at Miss Ida's, sitting on her porch. Miss Ida is halfway down Church Street. That's probably one reason folks end up there a lot. Another reason is Miss Ida is herself. And she and the best time are kind of alike, soft and peaceful. But the biggest reason we all end up there is Miss Ida's porch is a tellin' place. So boys and girls, I want you to stop and let's think about this setting. The setting is where the story is taking place. Now, this story obviously is taking place on Church Street, but where do they like to go to listen to stories? That's what I want you guys to be thinking of. Usually Mr. Fisher comes over to sit on the porch about the same time we do. It's about the time the sky is getting rosy all over. You know then that the best time is settling in. Miss Ida calls Mr. Fisher Poisson because they both come from Louisiana, and that's what people there used to call him. Mr. Fisher has been all over. It's hard to tell how old he is, but from all the stuff he's done, he could be really old. He doesn't look old at all, though, especially when he walks. He sort of bounces. Miss Ida always says Poisson has jaunty steps. So that's my alarm, don't worry. So boys and girls, what I want us to be thinking now, what is the time of day that he's describing? It's kind of when the sky turns pink and rosy. Can you make a guess what time of day that is? Mr. Fisher has lots of memories about the places he's been and things he's seen. Almost anything can make him think about something he saw or heard or did a while back. He'll start out, puts my mind on the time, and we know what's coming. Tell us about that time, Poisson, Miss Ida will say to Mr. Fisher when he begins remembering, and he will. Like the time Freda and Pumpkin were arguing about what Mrs. Jackson had said when she was over at Pumpkin's house visiting Miss Esther, Pumpkin's aunt. Lena Horne ain't never visited Miss Jackson, Pumpkin, Freda said. Miss Jackson was just talking out of her head, girl. You know she's 90 years old. You crazy for believing her. You don't know anything, Freda. Pumpkin was getting angry. Just because Miss Jackson's 90 don't mean her talking is out of her head. Most time Miss Jackson make more sense than you do. Pumpkin and T-Bone almost fell over laughing. Me too. All this made Freda fighting mad. Hold on there, Miss Lady, said Mr. Fisher, taking hold of one of Freda's hand. Don't press ugly on that pretty face. Tell me how you come to think Lena Horne couldn't have stayed at Miss Jackson's house. 'Cause Lena Horne is famous. Why would she want to stay at Miss Jackson's? Why not? Mr. Fisher settled back in his chair. I had a feeling that some remembering was getting started. Okay, stop right there and make a guess. What kind of story do you think he's going to tell? Used to be that most all the famous black folk who come to town stayed at somebody's house. How come, Mr. Fisher? Freda sat on the stoop in front of Mr. Fisher. Nowhere else for them to stay. Couldn't stay in hotels. Hotels did not allow no black guests, famous or not. When our folk come to town to give a speech, put on a show, or whatever they came to do, we had to be the ones to give them a bed. Now, boys and girls, I want you to stop and think. So this story that Mr. Fisher's remembering, when do you think this story takes place? Use your context clues. Do you think it's taking place now? Probably not, because this was kind of before integration, wasn't it? Right? So this story probably took place a long time ago, before any of us were born. Puts my mind on a time when, back in 39, there we go, in 1939, when I was working in West Virginia then, working in the mines, lived in a nice town close to where I worked. Lots of good folks there, working hard to make a life for themselves and their children. Mr. Fisher's remembering was making him smile. Anyway, a big dance took place in the town every year. Folks came from all around to go to this dance. That year, 1939, the dance was really going to be special. Duke Ellington was coming to town. The great bandsman himself was coming to play for the dance. Was Duke Ellington famous? I bet none of us knew who Duke Ellington was. Pumpkin was brave enough to ask. Mr. Fisher almost jumped out of his chair. Don't they teach you children nothing in school? Duke Ellington? Famous? Mr. Fisher was almost shouting. Don't get bothered now, Poissant. Miss Ida put her hands in Mr. Fisher's arm. She was speaking in that peaceful way she has. Can't expect anyone to listen if you're shouting now, can you? Said Miss Ida. Just tell the children about Duke Ellington. Tell them about the sound of that band, a sound that made your feet get the life of their own on the dance floor. Tell them how he not only led the band from his piano, but also wrote most of the songs they played. How you could hum your little baby to sleep with some of those pretty songs, and how some of those songs were played by big orchestras and sung by huge choirs all over the world. Mr. Fisher had a big smile on his face. I ain't got to tell them, Miss Ida. You doing a fine job, a mighty fine job. So who was Duke Ellington? Can you guys tell by what they were saying? The sky was starting to look like a never-tell blue blanket on Big Mom's bed. Never-tell blue is light enough to still be blue, but dark enough to hide the dirt, Big Mama says. The best time noises were still there, but they had changed. You could hear the chirping of bugs. One of the Tolvar kids was crying, probably asking for something he couldn't have. Mr. Willie was playing his radio jazz. Mr. Fisher was still remembering. Yes, sir, the great Duke Ellington was coming to play for us for our dance, and there was not one hotel in the state that would put him up and take his money for doing it. If he had a mind to rest himself in bed, it was gonna have to be in the home of some black person. Did he stay with you, Mr. Fisher? Pumpkin asked. Not with me, exactly, but in the house where I was living, Mrs. Lomax's house. Mrs. Lomax had a big, fine house, and she kept it real nice. I rented a room on the 3rd floor. Mr. Fisher started to grin like he always did when he got to a part he liked to tell. I was there when the great man arrived with 3 of his bandsmen. So you got to meet Duke Ellington? T-Bone was impressed. We all were. I not only met him, I was there when he sat at the piano in Mrs. Lomax's parlor. Duke's playing heated up in that little room. I'm telling you it did. He was some kind of good. Mr. Fisher grew quiet, a remembering quiet. He stopped smiling, too. Humph. Imagine that. A man like that, talented, famous, everything. Not being able to pay his own money to sleep in a crummy little hotel just because he was black. And after that, we were all quiet. I was wishing I knew more about what Mr. Fisher was remembering. I bet Freda was wishing so, too. So I bet you can tell from that picture that right there, let's see, that right there is Mr. Fisher and Miss Ida and all the kids listening to the story. And you know what, boys and girls? I'm actually going to stop our story right there, and we're going to finish it tomorrow because it is kind of long. So what I want you guys to be thinking about today is the setting of this story. Now, this year, whenever we talked about setting, there's 2 kinds of settings, right? There's the time and the place, which is just the regular setting, but we also talked about a cultural setting. What do you think the cultural setting of Miss Ida's porch is? That means, what kind of people is it about? What does it feel like? What is important to these people? What's like the heritage of these people here, and how does it affect the story? So in the comments below, I want you guys to explain what the setting is, what's the time and what's the place of this story. Now, the time is not 1939, remember? That's what Mr. Fisher is telling the story about. He's thinking back to 1939, and he's telling the story from his memory. But when is this story taking place? Where? And then what's the cultural setting of this story, okay? I want you guys to all be thinking, and then I'll comment on it to let you know if you're correct or not. I miss you guys so much. I can't wait to see your faces. Tomorrow is Friday, which means that Mrs. Howard and I are going to try and video call you guys. So keep that in mind. Be on the lookout for that on Friday. I miss you guys so much, and I can't wait to see you guys.